Trevor's unavailable right now, and rather than sit around waiting for him to return, I'm heading out on my own for a series of shorter conversations with authors, creators, and other interesting people. Think of it as a typical no-win scenario episode, just with fewer arguments, less supervision, and no Trevor to stop me. Welcome to No Win Scenario presents Don's Away Mission. And don't worry, Trevor will be back soon.
I haven't listened to anything you've said in the last 20 seconds.
Damn it, Trevor. We had a shtick.
Line.
Two friends who hate each other.
Rude.
Talking science fiction.
It has become this cultural phenomenon.
Along with some special guests.
I appreciate what Star Trek did to me.
I would love to have this book get banned.
That wasn't acting. That was real.
Do you know what our YouTube channel is?
Absolutely not. No win scenario.
With Trevor and Don.
Okay, we're not doing that.
Boom.
My guest today is proof that science fiction still knows how to ask the biggest questions there are. Andrew Gillsmith is the author of Our Lady of the Artilects, a metaphysical science fiction novel that's made headlines, earned rave reviews, and been described as a mind-bending supernatural science fiction novel where The Exorcist meets Westworld with a light dusting of Snow Crash. Here's the story. It's roughly 200 years from now. The wealthy own Artilects, humanoid artificial intelligences so advanced they're nearly indistinguishable from us. And then, all over the world, these machines start reporting the same thing, apocalyptic visions of a lady in white. When one of them claims to be possessed, the Vatican sends in a former neuroscience turned exorcist to figure out what's really going on. What looks at first like a simple hack turns into a mystery that reaches back centuries and forward into the question of whether the minds we build might have souls of their own. Andrew comes at all of this from a genuinely rare vantage point, a background in both religion and data science, which puts him right at the intersection of faith, philosophy, and the technology reshaping our world. And whether you're a writer, a lifelong sci-fi fan, or you just can't scroll past another headline about artificial intelligence, he has something for you today. Hard-won practical advice for anyone trying to actually finish and publish a book, and a great take on where AI is taking all of us. Please welcome Andrew Gillsmith. Please tell me that was all correct. That was a mouthful.
That was beautiful.
Sounds amazing.
That was beautiful.
Great.
I'm gonna have to forward that to my my publicist. Thank you for that introduction.
There you go. Some artificial intelligence may have helped with the design of that introduction, but I felt like that was an appropriate confession here. Here we go. AI confession for you here today. So before we talk about the book, I think I really want to start off with this. I think a lot of sci-fi readers are into science fiction, and I could be wrong about this, because they're not interested in religion. And I don't know if that's true, but I think there's definitely this sort of atheist agnostic core or at least wing of sci-fi fans. So why does religion have a place in science fiction in your view?
Well, what a great question to start off with. First of all, I think I agree and I disagree. I think there are a lot of people who are interested in sci-fi because they have issues with, let's call it, organized religion, right?
Organized religion, yes.
Maybe things from their past, their childhood. They don't feel like it speaks to them. They don't feel like it's relevant to them. But religious inquiry, theology, like the metaphysical questioning has always been at the heart of science fiction. Like when I look at science fiction, what I see is a genre that really is democratized theology. Okay, for better and for worse, depending on your perspective on these things, right? But it's a space for people to ask the biggest questions about the meaning of life, right? Like if there even is such a thing as meaning to life, what is our role and our purpose in the universe? What is the nature of reality? What is the fundamental nature of reality? And it's a tabula rasa on which essentially anyone can speculate. Anyone can bring a perspective. Now, what I will say is my perspective on it is I'm a Roman Catholic convert late in life. I went through a long period of agnosticism, a period of atheism. I was what I would describe as like an earnest seeker, right? I mean, I had some hostility to religion. I'm not going to lie. I had some things that happened in my life early on that left me feeling that way. But that wasn't the majority of my life. The majority of my life, I just felt like, I don't think the answers are over there. I think they're over here. And so I got deep into, data science and technology. in kind of my professional life and my training. Um, but I found myself being pulled back to it. I mean, and in terms of science fiction, I would argue that I think some of the greatest works in the history of the genre are all about religious questions. I mean, Dune, for one. I mean, we can just start with that, right?
Well,
And
that was an acid trip, no?
right, like what is the meaning of a Messiah, right? Like, what are the implications of being a Messiah? But then you also have Gene Wolfe, who, to me, I think Gene Wolfe is the greatest science fiction writer of all time. What did Ursula Le Guin called him, our Melville. And I think he's one of the few in the genre that really truly reaches like the absolute heights of literary accomplishment. Ursula Le Guin, for that matter. Ursula was a Taoist, right? And her Taoism comes through in a lot of her writing. Um, Dan Simmons was a lapsed Catholic. And, if you've read the Hyperion series, there's a lot of Catholicism in that. Walter Miller Jr., another one of my favorite writers, Mechanical for Leibowitz. I think all of these books are still relevant, and I think that there's room for this kind of speculation in the genre. I think there's a demand for it.
But without putting Canticle to the side, the other ones, it's if you know it, if you see these, if you know about these themes, you'll see it there. Where in your work, it's right on the face. You can't not see it. So, is there a difference there, or or
Yeah,
like
I mean,
why not hide it? You not hide it, but like why not mask it? Because like a lot of science fiction, it talks about social issues or belief, but it masks it through an alien, a technology, something like that, to give people space. When you're literally saying it's going to, there's a priest and there's all this, is it maybe not putting up a blocker or something for some people?
I'm sure it is, right? I mean, and I think any book that has a point of view is going to have blockers for people that are hostile to that point of view. And I
Yeah.
mean, and I'll just say, as a reader, of science fiction, like most science fiction that I read is very decidedly atheist, right? It sometimes annoys me, but it generally doesn't prevent me from being a fan, and from enjoying that fiction. Like, I don't have to agree with the perspective that I think the author has. Where I think it becomes a real problem is when it's preachy and it's hitting you over the head. And I don't think this book does that at all. I mean, for one thing, there are multiple religious perspectives in it. There's a pretty important Islamic character and Islamic storyline in it. There are atheists and agnostics in it, and they're not straw men. I mean, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to write a book that would have spoken to me when I was in that earnestly seeking agnostic phase, right? Where, like, I wanted to hear these different perspectives, even if I didn't know which one, ultimately was right for me. The other thing I would just say is, like, this is near future science fiction, right? Gene Wolfe is writing about millions of years in the future, like the death of the sun. Frank Herbert's writing, tens of thousands of years in the future. Even Walter Miller, many thousands of years into the future. But to me, like, one of the deficiencies in modern science fiction is that even when it takes a near future perspective, there's this pretense that, like, religion doesn't exist and
It's
never has
gone.
existed, and it's not even a factor in human life or society. And it's like, wait a second. I mean, this is like, how can you write meaningful near future science fiction and pretend that,
And
like,
avoid this big part
everybody
of
woke up and
society.
there's no religion whatsoever, right?
Yeah. That's a
Like,
sort of Star Trek thing too. The influence of that, I think, culturally, is that it's just like it's gone. It's not.
that's right.
Um. So let's get into the nitty gritty of the book. So where did this story come from?
Yeah. So this was my first book, and like a lot of first books, it's pretty personal in some ways. I mean, it is meant to be kind of an exploration of questions around consciousness and what is, like, what is the nature of our reality, right? Is there a way to reconcile scientific thinking with religious belief? Your mileage may vary on that. I mean, you're going to have people that have different opinions on that, right? That's the world that we live in. It's always been a world that we lived in. I have a point of view on that. I think that, like, the deeper you get, the more serious your inquiry is into both sides of that question, the closer you find that those two sides actually are, right? And so, like, I started to get really interested, when I was doing the research for this, not only in, like, modern theories of AI and, like, uh, morality, for example, is like a fundamental driver in cognition that like has to be built into any thinking machine, the way that's built into human minds. But also, questions around consciousness as a fundamental substrate of reality, right? And there's a lot of really interesting work being done right now by scientists like Donald Hoffman, who I actually got to speak to doing research for this book. He's a physicist at UC Irvine, who is developing mathematical models around consciousness as the fundamental substrate of reality. And he's done interviews, for example, with leading astrophysicists who tell him, and this is a quote from him that I love, space-time is dead. Now, the idea that space-time is anything approximating the fundamental layer of reality has become almost a laughable anachronism in the most cutting-edge physics today, right? It has been moving in that direction since the development of quantum theory. His theory, and I think it's an interesting one, and one that is shared by a lot of leading scientists, is that, it could be that consciousness is the fundamental layer of reality, right? And that space-time is an emanation from consciousness. Space-time is a way for consciousness to understand itself.
So how does this play out with the artificial intelligence in this story? So how do you port that movement or concept over into this fictional story?
If consciousness is fundamental, and if it's pervasive, if you think of it as a field, for lack of a better term, and I don't think it's a great term, but it's closest I might get to it, then what does the idea of truly creating artificial intelligence mean? Are you truly bringing something new into reality, or are you just accessing a layer of reality that has always existed and giving it new form? That fundamentally, I think, is one of the questions in the book. Now, there are going to be people in the book that have different points of view on that, right? There's an Islamic mystic who has this very decided point of view. He comes out of the Sufi tradition of Ibn al-Arabi, who was just a great medieval Sufi mystic whose writings actually really prefigured a lot of modern quantum theory, amazingly enough. You're going to have Catholic people who have a point of view on this. You're going to have atheists and agnostics and people from other religious traditions all kind of trying to get at answers to these questions. And what I hope is true in the book, what I certainly set out to do, was not, bash people over the head with my point of view, but to have interesting discussions between the characters.
It's not the same, but it kind of reminds me, I don't know if you've read Xenocide by Orson Scott Card.
Love it. It's my favorite Orson Scott Card book.
Okay, yeah. I love Speaker for the Dead more, but I think I don't remember the term. Is it twinning? There's something about where you're not actually creating something, you're kind of I forgot if it was not a soul, but it was something similar where there's this rooted entity that you're putting into a biological form or something, right? If I'm paraphrasing poorly, but it's not that far off, I think, perhaps there.
That's right. And again, without getting I don't want to make the book sound like it's some dry meditative philosophical treatise, because hopefully it's not. It is. Sorry to the readers.
Doesn't sound like it, though. It doesn't sound like it.
But there's another thinker, who was really influential to me. And again, not a Catholic. Hoffman's not Catholic. This guy isn't either. His name's Bernardo Kastrup. Some of your viewers might be familiar with, because he's done some great podcast interviews on the Theory of Everything podcast and with Lex Friedman. And he was a computer scientist at CERN, one of the earliest people, working on the particle accelerator, that ultimately discovered ironically, the God particle, but became essentially the world's leading rational idealist philosopher, right? And he's kind of revived the philosophy of idealism. And it's the idea that, the things that we see and perceive are just the way that our intelligence is able to perceive and make sense of reality. So, the example he uses, right, is, when you look at a brain, that's the way intelligence has to be presented to other intelligence, right? It's not, you're not the physical thing itself is only the representation that our senses and our minds are capable of perceiving of a reality that is much, much larger and much more complex. So intelligence always looks like that. It looks like a wet tangle of neurons, right? Now Kastrup would go on and say he's not a believer in artificial intelligence, true general artificial intelligence. And he's got this great quote that he says, look, I could build a model of of the urinary tract system, but that doesn't mean that it can pee on your desk, right? So like, his theory is like, yes, we can build things that look a lot like and model and sort of mirror human intelligence and general intelligence, but that's not what is actually happening.
So set the stage. What, I want to ask you, like, what is an Artilect, but set the stage. Like, what does the world look like that this story takes place in?
Yeah, so it's 250 or so years in the future. Geopolitics have changed a lot, but also stayed somewhat the same. The world is divided into different zones of power. There are essentially economic zones in Western Europe and North America, China, that are, in my opinion, pretty similar to the way those societies are organized today. There have been two new powers that have come into the world, really as a result of a war that's only lightly referenced. There is an Islamic caliphate that stretches from Morocco to Pakistan. Right, encompasses essentially the Islamic world today and Indonesia as well. And then there's a revived Holy Roman Empire. And the revived Holy Roman Empire is a lot like the original in one way, in the sense that it was always said about the Holy Roman Empire, it was neither particularly holy, neither particularly Roman, nor was it much of an empire, right?
Yeah.
That's true in this one as well. The difference is that because Christianity is becoming more and more of a global South phenomenon, this is a global South power, right? So it's predominantly sub-Saharan Africa, parts of South America, the Philippines. It's comprised of very different peoples and demographics than the original Holy Roman Empire was, but it's kind of revived that form, right? Where there's the state, the church is a part of is kind of co-equal to the state, sort of. I mean, it's a little bit in name only, and there's a constant tug of war politically between the church and the state about who's really driving the bus. And it's like the people of the revived Holy Roman Empire probably look a lot like a lot of people today. I mean, most of them are nominally Catholic, but it's not a rigorously imposed kind of religious. It's not a theocracy. I put it that way.
So you've got people living in this world, but then you've got these Artilects. And how is this different than sort of what we envision as the artificial intelligence robots of 2026?
Yeah. So there are kind of two key pieces of technology in this world. One is the Artilects, which are really a luxury item. They're almost like a yacht. Think of them the way you would think of a yacht today. Like they're really rare. Most people aren't ever even going to see one, let alone own one. But they're phenomenally impressive pieces of technology and status symbols for the ultra wealthy. They're viewed with suspicion in some parts of the world. The Islamic world, for example, doesn't like them. Then the other piece of technology are widespread neurological implants, right, that are designed to do things like reduce mental illness, improve cognition, improve memory. And those are tools that humans use. Now, again, without spoiling too much, I mean, you're going to come to find that these two pieces of technology have more in common than people think, right? In terms of the ability to influence events.
And you've got, without giving away too much as well, you've got something called the process in there too, right?
Yeah.
So what is that reflective of something you want us to think about now?
Yes. Yes and no.
Okay.
So the process is a group that is involved in the development of these technologies, but it's a lot older than that too. The process is essentially a group of people who belong to an ancient tradition that is about transforming consciousness and molding it in ways that they think will advance the species. It looks a little bit like modern transhumanism today, although it's not a direct crib on transhumanism. And it looks like some of the, let's call it moral philosophical movements that come out of Silicon Valley. I mean, probably the closest one people are reading really closely would be this idea of effective altruism, which is like, that's kind of like it's a moral philosophy that a lot of the Silicon Valley elite espouse. People like Musk and Thiel and, on and on and on, right? And it really is more or less moral utilitarianism for the modern era. It says, look, your goal is to put yourself in the position to do the maximum good. The things that you may have to do to get to the point of doing maximum good might be very distasteful, but that's okay, as long as you can get to the point where you can do maximum good. Now, how people define good, that's where it gets really interesting.
That is where it gets interesting.
That kind of utilitarian moral philosophy, I will say, I personally find repugnant. Right? I think it's a very anti-human way of thinking. I think it's a machine way of thinking. I think our minds are not even built to be able to do that because we can't really anticipate outcomes very well, right? Like we can't do 2 or 3 or like derivatives from, in terms of like a possibility tree out. And we're really, really bad at guessing what's going to happen. But, machines and artificial intelligence is pretty good at that, right? So if you have that kind of a mind married with that kind of a moral philosophy, now you're cooking, right? In terms of effective altruism and utilitarianism. But that way of moral thinking, is, I might as well just say it's very at odds with how I see the world. And it does come under some critique in the book.
So we've got AI and machines on one end, and we've got people on the other end, decision making. Let's talk about transhumanism, right?
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on? Are we going to at some point become one with the technology? Merge, upload, that singularity. Are we going to become something different ourselves, or is it just our creations that will be?
Well, I hope not. I'm not a transhumanist. I am a humanist. I believe in the value of human identity and human nature, and I would like to believe that it is largely unchanging and unchangeable. It doesn't mean that people can't be better than they have been in the past. But I think that, we are embodied intelligences, right? And the part of the idea of transhumanism is that, no. You're an intelligence that is trapped in a body, and we're going to liberate that intelligence and thereby give you some form of immortality. Maybe also remove the whole idea of, carnal sin from the equation. Again, there are Catholic transhumanists. So, what do I personally believe? I am not a transhumanist. I think it's a really dangerous movement. I also think it's quixotic and slightly foolish, if I'm being honest. The idea that you can just take a pattern that exists in your brain or my brain, and that pattern is somehow you or me, and that the experience of that pattern can then be uploaded to a machine outside of the physical embodiment of you or me, just seems to be sort of like patently absurd. Data can't even really be mapped in that way, right? Like you're creating copies of something, but the copy is never exactly the same.
You said a keyword, data, here. You have a background in data science. So I think we didn't actually touch upon that part of your background. So where does that fit into your biography?
So one of the things so I've always, even in my youth where I was raised in a pretty religious household, I struggled with doubt a lot, and I think in the modern world, I think doubt and faith are often presented as opposites, or if you can't be a faithful person if you have too much doubt. Like what you have to do as a faithful person is banish all doubt. And I just don't believe that. I think faith and doubt are closely related. I think they're both kind of oblique to certainty, right? And certainty is dangerous.
Certainty is dangerous. Yeah,
really dangerous.
Yeah.
I'm not sure certainty can ever be holy. How could you have?
I gotta tell you, I love that, because that's the thesis of my book. Actually, is certainty is dangerous. Yeah, it's mine is Ascendance, and it just came out in March, and it's about what if a corporation developed technology that seemingly proves the afterlife to people, and what would that do to organized religion? So we're not far off, but it's all about extreme ideology. What happens to society when you believe so hard in one thing that something else goes to the side. And it was all, when I first came up with the idea 20 years ago, it was all about my response to so much extreme ideologies that I was encountering in the world and in personal life and things like that. And that was my way of kind of weaving, my own self through that. So it's interesting. Yeah. I love that. Certainty is dangerous. Yeah.
So fundamentally, I believe that doubt can be holy, just as faith can be holy. And I think that any faithful person if they're being intellectually honest, will always struggle with doubt. And if they're not struggling with doubt, I question how faithful they really are and how holy they truly are. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, like if you just know something, like it takes no faith for me to say, I believe that this phone exists. I'm holding the freaking phone, right? It's in my hands. I feel it. I know the shape of it. I can directly perceive it. Leaving aside questions of filtering through perception, but like that has no bearing whatsoever on faith or doubt. It's not even in the same category. But faith and doubt and kind of like the vibration between faith and doubt that almost every person experiences in their life, regardless of their faith background or agnosticism, whatever it may be. I think that whole process is a holy process.
And I think it applies not just to religion and belief, but it applies to politics. It applies to everything. If you can't allow yourself the space for a little bit of doubt to question, I think people should be treated this way. Okay, this is what I believe. Other people here vehemently disagree with me. I can still hold on to my belief that this is the way to treat someone, but say, okay, let me try from their point of view or their perspective. Okay, I've tested it. I still agree with myself. But if you're like blinders on, then it's an awful place to end up. And I think a lot of us are in that blinded, mentality.
I
Right?
completely
Yeah.
agree. I mean, and it's sad. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when you could, vehemently disagree with somebody and still have a beer and be friends with them.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
mean,
And
it's
we just don't want to do that anymore.
that.
Yeah. The other side's always horrible, whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So talk to me about just like the practical advice for getting this book out there. Like, what was your process for getting this
Oh, goodness.
made? And, what I guess also I'm always asked, like, what's your advice for people who have that story that want to get it made and read?
Yeah. I mean, I think the classic advice is solid here, which is just start. Just start putting words down on the page. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing when I started it. I had a few scenes in mind. I had like kind of these themes bouncing around in my head, but I didn't have the characters or the places or the plot or anything like that. And so my process for writing this was, I mean, it was painful. I actually wrote it relatively fast. I think I wrote it in about 7 months, which
Wow,
not bad, right?
that's pretty.
But 7 or 8 months. But it was very much a pantsing process, right? Like, there's pantsers versus planners in writing,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
I cured myself of pantsing with this book. I don't think I'll ever do that again. But that was the only way that I could get this out, was just to have the discipline to sit down every day and do it, right? And then, again, I mean, none of this stuff is new, so it might sound a little cliched, but I think you do. Certainly, if you're an independent writer, you got to write for yourself, man. Like, don't write for the market. There is no market anymore.
There is no market anymore. I was talking to a publishing consultant this morning. So talk to me about that in terms of that. The publishing industry is just kind of scattered and messed up, or there's just so many different avenues and so many different ways to get content out to people.
There's so many ways to get content out. So few people are reading fiction. The fiction market is dominated by a couple of genres, that are extremely formulaic, and that's just entertainment that people want. I don't begrudge it, right? I mean, I'm not a romantasy reader, but have at it.
Right. I tell people when I was creating my novel, like, people were either like, we don't do fiction anymore, or we only do heated rivalry knockoffs. This is what I was hearing quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
And even I had a publicist around my launch of my book, and they kept trying to jam my sci-fi thing into the romantasy like look and feel online. And I'm like, this is not my audience. Like, you got romantasy influencers and reviewers now trying to throw my weird sci-fi thing in, and it's just this mismatch. But it's kind of a very narrow vision. That was my experience. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and so that was mine as well. I mean, I knew very early on, I was like, well, I don't have the patience to go through traditional publishing. So I knew right I was going to self-publish. I just knew that. And that's very liberating, because again, then you say, well, now I'm going to write what I want. And hopefully people like it, right? And in this case, they did. I mean, I released the book originally in 2022, and it sold between 20 and 30,000 copies, which for an independent book,
Yeah.
it's pretty solid. And it's just me doing the marketing and word of mouth, and I got lucky, in some ways. And then it was only after I wrote a few more books, and this book had kind of been in circulation for a little bit, that a traditional publisher found it. One agent found it first, and then pitched it to a traditional publisher. Said, I'd really like to republish this, and like, would you like? Is there anything you'd like to change? I was like, oh, absolutely, yes. You learn so much,
Round
going
two,
through it.
absolutely. Well,
Yes.
that's good for you. That's so interesting because number one is, I think the publisher you said something like the average self-published or hybrid published book or average book out there, or just in general, maybe sells 300 copies in the lifetime of the book. That doesn't go through a big publisher, things like that. And to do that 30,000 you said in terms of just self-publishing is quite a number. How did you accomplish that? Because that requires, you said luck and marketing, but that's worth talking about. Like, what did you do?
Yeah. Part of it is just like, going in a little bit, for me anyway, was like going in a little naive and not having any expectations. And, I had a few successful BookBub campaigns. I had a few successful Amazon
I love
campaigns.
BookBub. Yeah.
Love BookBooks, right?
Yeah.
And then it got picked up in a few like media outlets and a few influencers or reviewers who really liked it. And, that would always spike the sales. But really it was mainly word of mouth. It's mainly word of mouth. And I think there's just a huge, I do think, I'm sorry, but I think there's a huge element of luck
Yeah.
involved in it, and,
Yeah.
and I'm going to say this too, right? Like I was just having this conversation with my friends the other day, because we're part of this incense bug movement. That's what we call it. We write stories that have religion in it, but it's not preachy, and it's like gritty stories, like edgy stuff, but like religion is treated seriously, I guess is how I would describe it. And it's like, I do think people today, and this sucks for society, but I think people make a lot of their reading decisions based on like tribal concerns, right? Like, I want to read and support LGBTQ authors and trans authors. I want to read and support based authors. I really want to read and support Islamic authors. I want to read and support, religious writers, Christian writers, whatever. So, I got a little bit lucky because mine got kind of connected to, Catholic influencers and Christian influencers who felt like, again, they may not agree with everything that's in the story, but they knew that their belief system was being taken seriously.
Wow. That's all. Okay. That's amazing. Well, okay. So how do people best contact you and not contact you? Hold on. Find your work. End of the day here. I'm always with my media job. I'm always like, make sure we know how to contact you.
Yeah.
No, what best way to find your work and read up on you and get this book?
So you can buy the book on Amazon. You can also buy it direct from the publisher. You go to Our Lady, and that'll take you to the publisher site. It's available, and it's a beautiful hardcover with a dust jacket. I'm so thrilled with the way that they presented the book. There's an audio book that's narrated by one of my favorite actors. His name is Kogna Holbrook-Smith, which you may know him as one of the inmates from Paddington 2, which happens to be one of my all-time favorite movies.
No kidding. Okay.
But he's just he's a British Ghanaian actor, classically trained. He's so good. Oh my goodness. And then the ebook is available as well. Books.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. It was amazing talking to you. I was coming into this. I didn't know if we'd have anything in common. I'm a East Coast Jew who wrote this book that wanted to comment about religion by putting out science. You've got the Catholicism in your thing, and I think we're saying a lot of the same things a little bit at times. So that's very cool.
It. It's been a really fun conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I really appreciate you having me.
That's it for this away mission. Thanks to our guest and to all of you for watching and listening. Please subscribe on all the platforms, and you can email us at nowin-scenario-podcast@gmail.com. Trevor will return, I promise you. But in the meantime, I think we're thriving just fine without his supervision and snark. See you next time.